Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Horn Call podcast. My name is James Bolden. I'm the publications editor for the International Horn Society and your host. It's my honor today to talk with one of my musical inspirations and musical heroes on the horn, Jeff Scott, who is probably most well known for being the hornist in the Imani Wind Quintet for many, many years, and is now the associate professor of horn at Oberlin Conservatory in Oberlin, Ohio. He's also going to be a featured artist at IHS 55 this summer in Montreal, and this episode is coming out before IHS 55, so there's still time for you to get registered and take a trip up there. Louis-Philippe Marcellet, the host of IHS 55, and his team have put together just a terrific symposium for everyone that's going to be there. And if you're not, we will miss you, but we hope that you will be able to attend a future IHS symposium. Jeff Scott and I talk today about a lot of different things. We have a really good time. He's such an engaging and just vibrant person to speak to, and I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation as well. Again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with me today. I'm really excited about it. You're one of my musical heroes for sure.
Well, thank you. And like I said, off camera, you're very well known. So it's a pleasure to finally meet you.
Well, thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it. So maybe just on the off chance that folks might not be familiar with who you are and what you're doing right now, you want to give us the little thumbnail sketch of what your current position and job is, and then kind of the path you took to get there?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm currently the associate professor of horn at Oberlin Conservatory. I've been here for 3 years. Before that, I had spent pretty much 24, I think it was 24 years as a touring musician with the Imani Winds and Quintet. And I also lived in New York City where I was freelancing and doing the grind like everybody else, all my great colleagues in New York City. I played Broadway shows. I had played The Lion King for 7 years from the opening, and then, went on with Imani. I went to school in New York City. I went to Manhattan School in Stony Brook. Born in New York. And I'll tell you, I was really fortunate because I grew up in Queens. And in the 70s and 80s, in Far Rockaway, Queens, it wasn't cool to play French horn. So me with a French horn coming into, I was at Brooklyn College Preparatory Division. Me doing that on a Saturday was so uncool in my neighborhood. I can't get to tell you. But I was the kid, and this is no joke. I was the kid that, if you remember, with a boom box.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I had a boom box, and I was known for like walking down my block, and the tape would shuffle from Mozart horn concertos to like rap music, like one tune right after the next. And that was how I was the biggest nerd in Far Rockaway known. But that was my thing. And I really owe most of everything to a wonderful woman and a teacher. Her name was Carolyn Clark, a French horn player, and she was at the preparatory division at Brooklyn College. And I was on a scholarship that was actually anonymously given to me. I didn't know that until much later. When the scholarship ran out, I was still in high school, and we didn't have the bread to continue there. And so Carol taught me for free for the next 2.5 years to make sure that I got into conservatory. I kind of owe the whole thing because we didn't have it, so I would have definitely stopped and done something else. And Carolyn sort of invested in me, and she's second mom right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's very good. That's the Reader's Digest.
Now, I remember, I think in a masterclass many years ago, you mentioned something about, you had this successful career playing Lion King, and you were kind of doing the chamber music thing on the side, or maybe, it's tough to balance a full-time Broadway gig with basically anything else. You have to arrange for subs anytime you're going to miss a show or something like that. So how did you arrive at that decision to basically go like all in with Imani Winds?
Well, the MD kind of helped me make that decision. I don't have to name any names, but we have the rule on Broadway. It's the 50% rule, and over every 3 months or 4 months, I can't remember what it was, but as Imani Wynn started to get more and more busy, I was taking a week here, 2 weeks there to do these residencies we were doing, and I came to the office. I know it was in spring. It was kind of like May or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was coming into the office to ask for a 2-week leave for a residency, and the MD kind of knew I was coming. I had arranged it, and he had my pay stubs, copies of my pay stubs on the table.
Oh wow!
And it's the year to date in May was $1,100.
Oh wow!
So he looked at me, and I kid you not, he just said, "Jeff, how do we get here?"
How do we get?
And and he basically said, "Listen, there are people in town that could really use this chair, and if if things are happening for you, consider maybe giving it up." Didn't exactly say it that kindly, but I got the hint, and it was a tough decision at the moment because Imani was doing well, but not as well as a Broadway show. We didn't have health insurance,
Mm-hmm.
that whole thing. So it was a tough decision. But the decision really was about me wanting to challenge myself.
I see.
I'd gone to Conservatory like everybody else, and wanted to test the limits of my talent. And after about a week, you have tested your limits at a Broadway show.
Right.
We had it memorized within a month, and the only test was really the chops. Like, can you get through 8 shows? That was kind of
Mm-hmm.
but not the musical content. And so I really wanted to play art music. I wanted to be challenged. I wanted to collaborate with other musicians. I wanted to see the world. So it actually wasn't a tough decision in the end of the day. And boy, literally the best decision I made in my musical career to leave the show and jump on board with the Imani Winds.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I imagine once you got out of school and started, working full time, and then especially probably when you got into Imani, you probably started to realize, hey, there's a lot of skills that I need to be successful in this that maybe I didn't learn in college. There's maybe not a class specifically for that set of skills you need to make it in the music business. Are there anything big that comes to mind, stuff you learned kind of outside of school?
Almost everything. And in all honesty, because I think when you go to Conservatory, at least these days, I want to think that things have changed, especially with entrepreneurial classes,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea that you could actually cross-pollinate in other departments and learn how to improvise and all those kinds of things. That stuff just wasn't available. That pathway wasn't available in the 70s and the 80s, and so it was kind of like trying to learn a foreign language out of a book,
Mm-hmm.
and then being placed in that foreign country, like that, and you kind of understand what people are saying, but it's not relating to anybody in a real tangible way. That's the way I felt like when I got out of school. It's like I knew how to play the horn, but not specifically to anything that needed to be applied. So, I was getting called to play road shows with Barbara Streisand and Luther Vandross, and that was a certain type of way to blow into the instrument and lilt eighth notes, and then you get called to play the contemporary new music things, and then there was techniques that you just never got to. I didn't learn how to sing and blow through the horn until I was out of school. There was just things that you had to learn on your own, and all of that stuff came into play reading through scores with the quintet.
Mm-hmm.
Because we commissioned, you name it, out of every genre. we brought it to the classical stage. And these composers were so excited about having musicians that were willing to go to that next place. That was, a departure from the Killer Bees, Beethoven, Brahms.
Right, right. Well, and your approach was so fresh, and you were obviously playing at a really high level too. That's got to be a given. You were playing great, but then the repertoire was so new, and you hadn't heard wind quintets, let alone horn, play this kind of stuff really before. So I think that was really, really an amazing thing. Plus, you did the recordings and collaborations and all of that stuff. Now you've already kind of mentioned, having the boombox on your shoulder, and then you got the different kinds of music coming out of it. What were some of your musical inspirations growing up?
Well, I told my mom when I was about 14 or 15 that I was going to be the Michael Jackson of French horn.
Okay.
I wanted to play pop, rock, soul on the French horn. I don't know. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I figured I was going to do it. It still hasn't quite worked out. But my musical inspirations were the music that I grew up with. I grew up in Queens and then in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I was listening to soul, rap, merengue. I mean, you name it. All my best friends were the whole spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
The best man at my wedding was Orthodox Jew. I mean, everything I heard, you name it. And so those are my inspirations. And I wanted, in all honesty, I wanted the music that I performed to reflect that.
Mm-hmm.
It really did, to be really honest. But aside from that, when you talk about inspiration for a young person, it could be really simple. You just want to be able to see somebody that looks like you doing something, and then you go, "Oh man, I can do that," And so when I was coming up, my inspirations were the people that I saw. So I wanted to be Reggie Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, when I got this job here and I did the interview, they give you a couple of minutes to sort of tell them about yourself, to the search panel, And the first thing I said was, I didn't want to be a horn player. I wanted to play for the New York Yankees. I wanted to be Michael Jackson, Reggie Jackson, and it's the God's honest truth because he was my idol,
Mm-hmm.
And without the internet, I didn't know who Jerome Ashby was.
Right.
I didn't know who Bob Watt was. These people, Willie Ruff, Julius Watkins, I didn't know. So I didn't think, in fact, I was in New York Youth Symphony, how old it was, 16, 15, 16. And later in that year, we were going to do a side-by-side with the New York Philharmonic. And it was first rehearsal, and we were playing some piece, I don't know. And the conductor, David Allen Miller, I played my little solo thing. He goes, "Man, that was just fantastic. Keep that up. You're going to sound just like Jerome Ashby one day." I had no idea who he was talking. Not a blip, I was like, cool. That'd be great. But that's, I didn't see that. But I will tell you this, when we did that side by side, he sat next to me and we did this joint thing and that was all fine. But then the Philharmonic played something by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the overture to Oberon.
Yep.
And I'm sitting right next to Jerome Ashby, and I'm looking at the music, and he says to me, "Mr. Scott, have you ever heard this music before?" And I was like, "No, 14, 15. And I'm looking at it, and it looks like whole notes. I'm like,
mm-hmm.
Big deal, And he said, "You're never going to forget it." Cool. And the conductor is the coolest thing in the world, because the conductor didn't even conduct him. He just sort of, like, "You may begin." And Mr. Ashby played, and it started so soft. I'm sitting right next to it, I could barely hear it. Then it grew to this thing, and you could feel the resonance of his sound on the side of your body. And then he diminuendoed into the strings. And I looked down the section to the rest of my colleagues who were like,
jaws on the floor. Yeah.
So that was the first time I was just like blown away, and I was like, that's what I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing was I started getting recordings of my favorite horn sounds that I was hearing. And my teacher, I went to Carolyn Clark. I went to a lesson one day, and she had a recording of Myron Bloom
Mm-hmm.
playing the Brahms trio at Marlborough with a Sirkin and Tree.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way I want to sound.
Yeah.
You know, I aspire. So those are kind of my big heroes later on.
That's really cool. And tell me a little bit about how you got into composing and arranging, because that's another equally impressive part of your career. You've got this performing career, very distinguished, but then I'd say you're pretty well known as a composer too.
Thank you for saying that. Well, when I got out of college, actually while I was still in, and then when I got out, I started playing around New York City, and there were tons of these experimental bands going around. Everybody was doing their own funky thing. And I was in this group called No No Nonet. Yes, the takeoff. It was an all brass and percussion band, and the members all did the writing because it was an odd instrumentation. There was no specific music for it, and so the guys that were doing it, Rob Sussman, Glenn Makos, they were all bringing in charts, and I was just checking out what they were doing, and they were like, "Jeff, you got to bring some charts in. We need music, you know." So I started dabbling, and they were horrible. I mean, they really terrible charts. But I started to hear kind of like what they were doing, how they would orchestrate, so I started learning that in that band. I was kind of like how I sort of got, incubated into the thing. But then to tell you the truth, it was playing with Imani Winds.
Mm-hmm.
The wind quintet, up until about 20 years ago, just didn't have any music. He just didn't have it, I mean, it was, Donzi and Rika.
Yep.
And then composers took a nap.
Yep.
And woke up in 1940. And then you got some really great stuff, the Hindemiths and the Villalobos and all. But then there's like a few things in there, but nothing to make a career of. Not touring year after year after year. And so Valerie Coleman, my sister from another mister, she was already a graduate from Boston University and studying also at Manus, and she was bringing in fresh stuff, and I was just checking out how she was doing things. She was getting colors and using the instruments in unconventional ways, And I said, okay. So I started with arranging, bringing in some stuff like Piazzolla stuff, that kind of thing, and then I really started going for it. And when I started bringing it in, the bottom line is when you bring something into an ensemble of that level, if it sounds bad, it's probably bad writing. And so it was like this perfect lab band because I would bring in, half a page or something, and they would even tell me, it'd be better if you did this, and that's how I learned, to be really honest. That was how I did it.
And so I guess, this is a French horn music podcast, so we might as well get into the weeds. Do you want to talk a little bit about your composition process and how you, or maybe even like how you figure out, well, that might sound good adapted for wind quintet, or what kind of process do you go through?
Well, first of all, I always make sure the horn part is the easiest part. And then, just because I get to make the decision. So
right. Yep.
I get to play the whole notes, just kidding. But the process has always been, in terms of how to select repertoire, was like, what was the need of the ensemble? Do we need a big meaty piece? Do we need an opener to kind of get people blah 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 blah? Do you need a closer? So that was we'd call it like preparing a meal, and we'd say, do you need an appetizer? Blah blah blah. And then source material for me. I was always trying to find something that hadn't been in the genre previously. And that caused issues because wind quintet always had the stigma of sort of that cute ensemble that plays, light and fluffy, and it never, it just, no one ever thought about it seriously, because it just didn't rock like a brass quintet, but we had the secret weapon. We had Monica Ellis, the bassoon player. That you can't imagine like sitting next to somebody that plays the bassoon from a Copeland style to a Duke Ellington style. It was like or like Earth, Wind, and Fire. Like this woman plays the full spectrum, and it allowed for not only for the group to be able to switch into different genres of music, which meant a lot of ethnic and folk music, but it also allowed me as a horn player to just play the horn and not feel like I had to play so soft and and delicate, and for that reason, then that foundation that she gave us also allowed the players to really play with orchestral sounds. And there are not many wind quintet horn players that get to experience that. I have to admit that is an amazing feeling. And so my perspective when I was writing this music was that it didn't matter what the genre was because I knew my band was going to come with it. So I could write, like screaming parts and I just knew it was going to work. I knew it was going to work, and so we did everything. We did African drum circle music. We did piazzolla tangos, but we just went into so many different genres. And then the jazz cats started hearing what we were doing. And, I don't know what your experience is with, crossing over and playing. I'm not a jazz musician.
Same. Yeah, same.
But you put me in a jazz band, and I did play and have played for many years with the Lincoln Center jazz ensemble when they need a horn. And it's never like I'm not blowing, but, they have a horn part, the swing and all that stuff. Like I know how to swing. Man, they started hearing like this wind quintet that could play, in a certain style, very Copeland-esque, and then bam, flip and make it like down home blues. Oh, we started getting calls from like you name it. I mean, literally Wayne Shorter, Chick Corea, you name it. We were doing. I cannot tell you the thrill, the ride that was playing with these guys in these crazy stages and all over the world. And like swinging and not even like I never like Brahms never went through my mind, and I love Brahms, you know what I mean? But to be able to be in an ensemble that allows you to have that whole other side of the spectrum, and to be respected for being able to do that, that is an incredible feeling, And they're still doing it, I'm the old fogey that.
Well, it certainly seems like you're keeping busy, though. I mean, it doesn't look like you slowed down any. So, but I imagine bringing that into your teaching job now. I mean, what a wealth of experiences you have. From coaching chamber ensembles to talking to people about this is how the music business works. This might be what you pick up in music history class or something, but kind of there's a difference in how the real world actually works. Talk a little bit about like your teaching philosophy as far as teaching the horn and what you do there at Oberlin and that kind of stuff.
Here at Oberlin, I've really sort of made a bit of a turn. I was for 18 years, I was an adjunct at a bunch of places, mainly at Montclair State University. And then last like 3 or so years, I did some work at Manus. And being an adjunct, you just can't really invest too much time. Just because that's just how you're compensated. You do lessons. So, but when I came here, I really thought about the sort of the whole spectrum of, taking students from how they arrive, and truly trying to find a pathway for them to a place in music where they feel comfortable, and not trying to create a soul pathway that is sort of the canon that has existed for many years in Europe, but definitely since we started doing classical music here in the States in the late 19th century, so that we really realize your true potential. Now that doesn't mean we don't study Mozart. I mean, I can show you right here on the wall. Everybody gets this. Everybody gets this. And we do Koprash, and we do one movement of a Mozart so that we understand, when they come in, like the history of the instrument.
Sure.
And we work on technique and all that stuff. But in terms of preparing them for what we call the real world, I'm trying to find the conduit to the real world by giving them real world experience in here. And so I don't want to continue, and you, to be really frank, you cut this out if you want. To be really frank, I insist on not continuing the basically the Ponzi scheme that is telling kids that if they practice, 6 or 7 excerpts and a exposition to a concerto, that in 4 years they can go out and just conquer the world. That's just not reality. Not only
not at all
reality, it's not reality. It's not the path for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are students that is what they want, and that's what we do. And everyone does do the excerpts and everything. But I also have to prepare and give a pathway for kids that want to do new music, that want to do pop, that want to do studio, that want, and so you have to expose them to that stuff. And so we do, I've had John Clark come in here and do blues. He's taught everyone in my classes learn how to play blues. I've had R.J. Kelly come in, and he's taught them how to play natural horn, because I don't know what the heck I'm doing on that. And we get Adam Unsworth every once in a while to come in, and he shows them that you can do both.
You can play bebop on the horn, yeah.
You play bebop on the horn, and you can play principal in some major orchestra. They have to see that those are different pathways. That was not the case when I was in school. When I was in school, you learned those excerpts and that's how you were judged. And if you didn't do well in that, they were considered to not be such an accomplished young player.
Right.
It's just mind-boggling, because there's talent in all other, styles of music that you can get. Anyways, I'm going way deep, but my philosophy is that there is a sort of a pedagogy that, technically speaking, we have to address, that you're capable of just physically playing the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to music, I'm not going to just go through all the Gallet books and all of the Forrest Stanley and all that stuff. I'm not just going to cram that down their faces. I'm looking to see, like, what turns you on musically.
Mm-hmm.
How can I get the same pedagogy out of, once we get a real baseline, how can I get you the same pedagogy that's going to take you to where you want to be musically, and introduce you to those things as we go along, so that when you leave here, you're one step closer to that, and you're not like me, and you come out and you go, ah!
Well, and success doesn't look the same for every person. I mean, there's not one measure of success for every single person that's ever played the instrument, because that's, as you said, it's just so limiting. I mean, if you're only defining yourself by getting that whatever thing you think you need to get that everybody else seems to be going for, that's a really tough way to go.
And it's a bad way to walk through life, judging yourself by what the rest of the world is doing, but that may not necessarily be what's best for you. And I think a lot of my colleagues, coming up, since that was the only pathway that was given to us, they fell off and decided to go elsewhere because they weren't presented with any other pathway.
Yeah. And it's not for a lack of talent or not for lack of hard work or anything,
Man, I can tell you, poor players I came up would run circles around me when we were doing auditions at school, but they're not playing anymore. And it's, it's a shame, because nowadays there are other pathways.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important, I think, just to prepare students for what they truly want to be in music. At least give them the sampling so that they can make their own choices, be autonomous in the choosing.
Right. I mean, it's an exciting time because there are those alternate revenue streams. You don't just have to make all your living playing in an orchestra or all your living doing just one thing.
Absolutely. I didn't. I didn't. I did it all. And the thing is, I'd be a hypocrite then if I taught here and said, "Oh no, you must, learn these excerpts," and then, that if I don't show them, because they're asking me in studio class,
mm-hmm.
How did you get to do X? How did you get to do Y? I'm not going to tell them, well, I made sure that I practiced all my excerpts and I played for somebody. That's not how that happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not.
Yeah.
And then there's also networking and learning how like just the P's and Q's of the business. Now there are teachers, and I don't know what your teacher was like. Well, my teachers taught me that stuff
Mm-hmm.
when I was coming up.
Yeah.
Some basic stuff. And that just as a baseline just needs to be not taught, but like retold.
You gotta learn the deadly sins. Yeah. For sure.
For sure.
But I've had some friends both in and out of music go to Oberlin, and I bet you get some really intelligent, bright, curious students there. I bet that's a thrill getting to work with those folks.
They are they're it's almost cliche to say, but it's just like a joy.
Mm-hmm.
See, people that think about music and life and and the culture all at the same time, and how they can figure out how they can like combine all that and contribute. And that's what the majority of the students want to do here. And that's just not only in my studio, like all around. And I've often said, it's my job to kind of just show the path and stay out of the way,
mm-hmm.
And let them sort of like like you'll guide, but you just get out of their way because they are constantly thinking, constantly creating. And I see it every student that somewhere between the second and the third year, that light comes on, man, and it's just like wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. These kids are on fire, man.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a great conservatory, and it's not that far from Cleveland. I mean, there's cities nearby to do freelancing and stuff. So it seems like a good situation there.
Yep. Yeah. No, the Cleveland thing is also really great because I think for like $50 or $60 you can go the whole season.
Oh wow. Okay. That's a good band.
pretty good. And we had Nathaniel come down, and they're like, they love him because he's young like them.
Yeah, he's their age basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And like every week they go up there. Like there's a good chunk of my kids. They go up there every week, and they always wait for Nathaniel to come out. And the thing is, they know his routines. They're like, yeah, well, we know that we had to be late because he likes to warm down. And so we waited another 30 minutes before he came.
Oh, that's funny. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. So besides the teaching gig, what else are you up to? I know you're still composing because I have a collection. I have the Lift collection, music for horn by Black composers, and I know you've got a piece in there. But we can talk about that project some, or if you want to talk about other stuff you're doing these days, that'd be cool too.
Well, that was a really cool project. Yeah, I mean, it's just a great project, and I'm just real happy that I'm doing music in a time period where folks are recognizing music written by folks of different pen colors.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've always been doing it, but the recognition has not always been there. And now that it is, it's just a pleasure to be associated with organizations that are promoting the music. I have a good association with the Detroit Symphony. I've done some stuff with them. I got some stuff coming up in the future. I've written, a bunch of horn stuff recently. I've been real fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Literally the whole orchestral, vocal, solo. I've been really fortunate. And to be really honest, if I'm not careful, I'm going to overdo it. And really contemplate, how much of this teaching. It's because composing is time consuming.
Yeah, and then the revising process, and then it's a lot of it is probably just spending time thinking about what you're going to do. To your point about there being composers of color throughout history, that's the cool thing about this collection is it starts off with like 18th century Black composers that a lot of people just never knew about. And so I think it's a cool collection.
Yeah, I didn't know these folks. Coming up, I went through all my schooling. I had never heard about Nathaniel Dett, Florence Price, William Grant Still. Yeah, I didn't know about these folks. It's a shame, and it's great that we're doing it now. But boy, So I've been in a lot of conversations with a lot of initiative groups that are really trying to do some major change. And I was just talking with I can't say what orchestra, but it's a very very famous orchestra.
Okay. Okay.
That is very close to you. Is considering um, uh, in changing a little bit the excerpts requirements to be a little bit more diverse and inclusive. And
That would be really cool.
It's a game changer.
For sure.
If that happens, it's a true game changer. Because I think, it's one thing to say we're going to play this music. It's another thing to require the incoming applicants to be able to play it. Because then that means that's what us at the conservatories will have to.
It'll have a ripple effect. Yeah.
It has a ripple effect, and then that becomes what you audition on when you go to conservatory. It's the whole,
That is game changing, because that'll, as more orchestras perform this repertoire, then they need to hear it on auditions. Then people will study it. Then they got to buy the excerpts, and then
Right. And so I've been a part of a lot of initiatives like that. Weston Sprott, I don't know if you know Weston, but he's at Juilliard, the prep division, and he recently spearheaded this big project where they did basically the same thing. They commissioned a bunch of black and brown composers to write pieces for the preparatory division level students who would also then use those pieces as audition pieces to get into college. So I was a part of that. I just wrote a piece for Weston and the prep division there. So there's, if institutions like that are doing that kind of important work, it literally is a game changer. Juilliard says you have to, or you not have to, I shouldn't say that, take that back. But if Juilliard says an option for you as a solo is a solo work by Jeff Scott to get into Juilliard, it's a game changer.
That's really cool.
It really is. It says so much about what the institution thinks about the future of classical music. And I can't be more thankful to be a part of that.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be alive and to be a musician, for sure. With all of the problems in the world, and there are plenty, but it is an exciting time. So, well, Jeff, I think a nice way to kind of wrap up our discussion today, and thanks again, you've been so gracious with your time. I think a good way to maybe get into our last topic of discussion is to talk about the IHS. You got a gig coming up. You're going to be a featured artist at IHS 55 in Montreal. So maybe talk a little bit about, if you want to share a little bit about what your program's going to be, and maybe, your involvement with the IHS.
Yeah, well, I've been on just elected to the board just last year, serving my second year. And that's exciting because you get to be a part of all these decisions, especially when it comes to commissions and so on. And so that's been real exciting. Going up to Montreal is going to be a real treat. I haven't gone to many of them over the years. And it always, when it's in a cool place, you kind of want to go because it's a cool place, and I was actually going to go anyway because it's Montreal, and I love Montreal. And then I got the call from Luis. And so I'm thrilled to be going up there. Some of my music is going to be performed by other horn players, which is kind of cool. And I'm going to premiere this really really cool piece, and I'm excited to do it. I found out years ago about a lot of history in my family, and it just, when you're as a composer looking for source material. Sometimes you run out of ideas, And with all of this new information that I got about my family and the history and the lineage and all that stuff, I just realized, man, there is a ton of source material there. And so one of the real tough things that happened for me and my family recently is that we lost a couple of I lost a couple of uncles to COVID during the pandemic, and it caused my mom to really start talking about some things. Just sort of how she feels about the relationship between her and her brothers and family and everything, and opened up just an amazing amount of just history in my family that she had kept pretty safeguarded, as most of our parents do with trauma and stuff like that. About the second or the third conversation that I had with my mom, who's very much alive, I decided I was going to record it.
Okay.
And I just wanted to keep it for, just for my own safekeeping. And then when I knew I was going to be doing this last year in Montreal, I said, I want to bring a new piece. And I didn't want to compose it, though, because I didn't want to be that close to it. So I got a close friend of mine, amazing composer, by the name of Brazilian composer by the name of Rodrigo Bolsan, to write me a piece using her voice in those recordings and me as source material.
Oh wow!
And it's a powerful, powerful piece. What I found out is that when my mom and I are talking and we get sort of into it a little bit, like just relax and talk, that we both have extremely jazz influence tendencies. For instance, she'll say something like, blah, 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 I did blah, blah, blah. And I go, what? Like that. And
that's so interesting.
It's just natural. And we all, as human beings, have those ways of responding and the way you laugh, that sort of thing. And so Rodrigo found a way to notate all that stuff.
And my goodness.
I'm playing with my own voice, with my mom's voice, responding. It's a really, really hit piece. It's challenging because I have to do that foot pedal thing. I've never done that stuff. So
the choreography is tough on some of that stuff where you have to get effects and things in there. Yeah.
So that's what the big practice for me is, just to not kick the thing and knock it on the floor. But I'm really excited to premiere that piece. I'm going to do some Lear songs. I'm going to do a couple of, during the pandemic, I also commissioned a bunch of etudes from a bunch of composer friends of mine, and I'm going to play some of those.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Some jazz influenced etudes. I'm going to do an arrangement of an original piece that I did for a wind quintet with big band, and I'm going to redo it for 4 horns and big band. It's this Latin jazz piece.
Oh, that's going to be amazing.
Real funky, man. We're going to have some fun with that. So I don't know who we're going to play with, but I hope they can blow, because everybody's going to be, hey, you're going to blow. We're going to play.
I think they'll be able to find some folks. Yeah. I think they'll be able to find some people. So
I think you're right.
That's exciting.
That's it. Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if any of those things are published yet, but I hope they do get published, because sign me up for all of it. Because I think, people are going to eat that stuff up, because Mozart's great. Kopach is great. It's all great, but you can't just live on that alone.
Right. And it'll always, here's my thing, especially if somebody's listening to this podcast and they go, man, it needs to, no, it's always going to be great. There's nothing, it has been established that Mozart, Brahms, that they're great. We don't even have to have that conversation.
Right.
Let's find some other great stuff to put with it.
Right. It takes nothing away from them to program other music. Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's have a party and invite Mozart.
That's amazing, Jeff. That's so cool. I don't think we could go out on a better note.